Back to Statecraft. We are live. It's 1 p.m. here on the channel here with Brett out there in D.C. He just watched the inaugural address from President Donald Trump. He also saw the swearing in of Mike Pence and Donald Trump. Hi, Brett. How you doing?
I'm good, Carrie. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. It's a fun day. I've cracked some wine and I'm ready to try to get through the rest of this day.
Yeah.
So it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, I went down on the opposite end of the memorial, went down by Pennsylvania Avenue. I didn't, again, like I said on our last broadcast, my goal today is to mingle with people. My press credentials are great to let police and officers, not give me quite as hard of a time with stuff. But my goal is to be with the people today and not stuck in a press box.
Right.
So I went way out there in the fields where everyone was watching the big jumbotrons. It was very, very interesting. The way they had it set up was certainly interesting because there weren't a lot of jumbotrons. So you had to be at a very specific part. For example, you actually couldn't watch it from the front of the memorial behind me, which is unusual. But yeah, it went off very well. As of 12:05, so what was that, an hour ago now, America's now great again. So everybody can mark that off on their to-do list and come back again in 4 years, and we'll make sure it's still great then. But in seriousness, Donald Trump, his speech, as we expected, was about 20 minutes long. It was much shorter than your traditional speech from an incoming candidate. I actually thought Chuck Schumer's speech was rather good, arguably even better than Trump's. But with Trump, one thing that we should immediately note is that uncharacteristically, this speech had very little to do with Donald Trump. He talked very much about putting the power back in the people's hands, that for the first time in he didn't actually specify how long. I'd wager maybe the Reagan administration,
Right.
that he believes that the power is now back with the people, that the balance has been restored via Donald Trump. And he said that pretty eloquently without bringing himself into it all that much, which is something is very uncharacteristic for him. As someone who came out, right, as someone who came out on some speeches and said, I alone can fix these problems. A inauguration speech that thanked the outgoing president very respectfully, was very complimentary of the American people and their vision and their spirit. And Trump, did his A game. This is what Trump is really good at. Trump is really good at maybe not necessarily the details. It wasn't a detailed speech, but making people feel like they have a voice, that they are being heard, that he is the vessel of the common man, for them to actually get their voice through a gridlocked Washington that hasn't been listening to them for so many years. And that's exactly what a speech did. So I think for Trump supporters, they're absolutely thrilled. And I think for everyone else, they feel exactly the way they did before 12:05. And for them, America's still not very great.
Right. I think for me, I was watching this speech. I felt it was very elementary. I felt that watching him, he didn't really give me anything new that, it felt like a speech that he could have given in Washington in Michigan or Ohio. It's pretty much the same rhetoric that he's been kind of dealing all along. And I didn't really feel that it was a very presidential speech. I almost felt that it was more authoritarian, trying to rally the people. And one thing I've always liked about America, that I've always been proud of to be an American, is that we are all about everyone. And I kind of felt like we're trying to ostracize ourselves a little bit from the rest of the world. And that's a little bit of a scary thought as I was watching the speech. What thoughts do you have on that?
You make a good point, Carrie, because it was very much an isolationist speech of sorts. His mantra, contrary to, Republicans have always been more isolationist to a degree, with the exception of Bush, second Bush. Now, with him in particular, his big point in the speech was that we help people secure their borders, we don't secure our own.
Right.
We don't secure our economic interests, and as a result, our trade moves out of the country. As a result, our opportunities and our jobs and our innovation all move out of the country, and these are things that he's very hesitant about. These are things that he feels that he can fix. And to be honest, I think that elementary atmosphere of his speech is very much intentional, because Trump has always talked like that. And for him, he connects with the common man, and I think that's something you have to laud Trump for. I do want to mention, as you hear a helicopter going over me right now, that is President Obama and the outgoing First Family moving over the Washington Memorial. They're going to pass. You might even see them right behind me here. Yep. Oh, we got them. There they are. You see it?
Yep.
Yep, they're going behind the memorial right now. That is the outgoing First Family. In any case, that's one of the reasons that Trump won this election, was because Hillary Clinton would go to these common man voters, people who live in Michigan, Pennsylvania, places that she should have won. Mm-hmm. And he said to them, she was saying to them, I'm going to teach you how to code. You're going to code. You're going to be involved in new industry. And what he was saying to them is, no, we're going to bring coal back. We're going to bring your jobs back. We're going to stop exporting those to China and Taiwan great again.
Right.
And that is something that he hammered on the speech really hard. And when I was talking with his supporters in the crowd, it's very brass tacks with them. Oh, hi, Obama. You're going back again? Okay. Mm-hmm. You can probably hear him doing a little bit of a final victory lap. In any case, that is something I was talking with a lot of these people. They feel that, he's a businessman. He'll get it done. We don't care what he says. We care what he's going to do. That's what we talked about in our broadcast a couple hours ago.
Right.
And for them, that is, securing those jobs, bringing that trade back, fixing deals like NAFTA that they feel are not conducive to making America number one. That's something that he hammered really hard on. He said it multiple times. We will make America number one again. We will make America first again. And that's a lot of people don't feel like the Democrats have done that. A lot of people feel like the Democrats spend a lot of time ensuring the interests of others and not necessarily the interests of the American people. So they spoke, and that's what Donald Trump kind of presents to them.
Yeah, we do have a question actually that kind of rolls into this. Megan Anderson has asked, well, what does it mean to make America great again? And when was the last time you felt that America was actually great? It's a great question, because I think it was one of those things that's just been brought through the whole campaign. When was America great again? And a lot of us feel like, was that the 50s? Was it the 30s? And we're talking about times of war and times of things. So what does it mean to make America great again?
It's a great question, first of all, Megan. So thank you for that. I think what Trump means it to be is Reagan era. I think Trump would like to see a return to American commerce that's based in America. And obviously people who are more critical of it, the Make America Great Again thing can be more divisive, because you have stuff that harkens back to the 1950s. I have a colleague who says, and I feel like I can say this on air because this is how a lot of people feel. A lot of people feel like Make America Great Again was when black people knew their place and women stayed in the kitchen.
Sure.
And that is certainly the 1950s mentality.
And what does it mean for you as a millennial? Because, like you said in the last podcast, we were talking about the fact that Trump is an old man, and he's now representing your future, my child's future. And it might not affect, 70, 80-year-olds as much as it's going to affect you guys in the long run. So what does this mean to you?
I think Dominic Jacoki, who was my co-host and co-anchor on our Blazing Caribou Studios election coverage, he said this was, the dying breath of a generation, similar to Brexit. And while that some people may assume, he's not wrong. Young people didn't show up to vote the way they never really do.
Right.
But in particular, both Brexit and Trump, they were not run by the minority vote. They were not run by the youth vote. They were run by older Midwestern white people going out and voting. It looks like Trump is, Obama's passing one final time right there.
Aw, he's circling. Aww.
Yep.
Well, and that's the thing, because, older people have a lot of time on their hands. They can wait in the lines. One thing my daughter had brought up that was really interesting is that, the kids that were 18 in high school couldn't vote because they were in high school, and then they had sports things to do, or, drama or whatever it was after school that they had commitments to. They had no time to vote. So, I mean, what does this mean for the next generation? Do we change how we vote? Do we open up, do you think this will bring a discussion to, the change in basically how we do our basic voting? And I'm not even talking about, computers and all those types of things. I'm just
Sure.
talking about time.
Sure. Well, first of all, to answer your original question, for me as a millennial, making America great again, quote unquote, has a lot to do with embracing modern technology and modern sensibility, both economically and socially in particular. Millennials care about social issues a lot. That is something that Trump has not done very well with. That is something that makes America great for a millennial like myself, and very likely a millennial like your daughter or anyone else in that age bracket. And also, embracing technological innovation, the likes of what's coming out of, like Elon Musk or Silicon Valley or Mark Zuckerberg. And we can talk tonight about Mark Zuckerberg because I think he's going to run for president. But I digress. To answer your other question, which was, remind me.
Oh, the part about
the voting, correct.
Yeah,
the
open
voting.
up discussion for voting.
I think voting, my hot take here is I think voting has to be a national holiday. I don't understand why it is. And if we're not going to make it a national holiday, then we need to make it on a weekend.
Right.
It's absolutely ridiculous that you have low voter turnout and then you have bureaucrats complain about it and people can't get out of their jobs to vote. It's very similar to how I feel about the DA. Going and doing your civil duty in court is that, for a lot of people, they want to go serve on jury duty. They want to go vote. But what, jury duty? Oh, there's a lot of birds. Jury duty, what, pays you $15 a day? They pay for your lunch. And very likely your employer will not reimburse you, will not pay your lost wages. The federal government certainly isn't. It's the same thing with voting. So my camera was turned off, so I'm gonna turn right back on. My apologies, everybody. So the same thing has to happen with voting, and I wish that millennials would get out and vote more. I think a lot of them would feel less frustrated today if they did, quite frankly. But I think that's something that also has to be brought with a candidate. I traveled here with a group of other journalists, and we talked in the car, and some journalists are openly liberal or openly more conservative, usually the former, and a lot of them felt very disenfranchised, felt that that their candidate was not heard the way they wanted them to be, whether that be Sanders, whether that be Clinton. But Clinton couldn't have been a worse candidate. Right. And I know that's a definitely hot take here.
No, they backed the wrong horse. It's sad, but that's what happened. Yeah.
And if there's any Democrat that could have lost to Donald Trump, it was Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
She had too much baggage. The Clinton name had been worn out. Millennials didn't want to vote for her. And there just wasn't anything. There wasn't anything there that compelled people in the way someone like Donald Trump did. Right. And I think what millennials have to see happen is they have to become engaged. They have to become engaged. I was just talking over here by the memorial to a couple more of the 420 people who are very eloquent, surprisingly. And they said, this can only happen if we're engaged. This can only happen if people are lobbying at state and local levels in order to progress change with recreational marijuana on a state, local, federal level. Sure. And that goes the same for voting with youth. Woo, okay. A lot of birds.
Well, I have a question for you, too. We can vote in this country at age 18. Do you think there should be voter restriction on age limits going towards the latter? Would that change numbers?
You mean like older? Like older
yeah,
vote?
Absolutely. Like at one point, because I had somebody bring up in a conversation once stating that, well, I have an 85-year-old that could be passing away soon, basically determining my 18-year-old, I'm 18 years old and my future for the next X amount of years. And that's not quite fair. So it was brought up by a millennial. It was an interesting take. Just throwing it at you, since we can't vote until we're 18 and it's not like babies can vote and, represent themselves, should the elderly, the extreme elderly, and I'm not talking about, 60s and things like that, but the extreme elderly, should they be limited to vote?
Ooh, no. But I do think that I'm actually of the opposite mind. I don't think the voting age should be younger, but I think more federal ages should be brought down to 18. It's always struck me as odd that you can die for your country, but you can't have a drink.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's always been weird to me. But in any case, I think we enter dicey territory when we start placing restrictions on what American citizens can vote and which ones can't, or which ones can vote less, or anything like that. Because one of the concerns of the Democrats is voting accessibility, that some people don't have state issued ID, especially people who are older.
Well, you could argue, well, we take voting rights away from, the elderly, but we also are taking away women's rights on abortion and those types of things. So you could argue, like, where does the government stop and the public begins?
I think that has to be the core of legislation. If people feel that the government is taking away women's rights, something that that Trump has flirted with, especially in regard to abortion, then that's something that has to happen at a legislative level. You have to go out to your locals and petition and protest and write your representatives. And I know all this sounds really cliche, but it works. It genuinely does work. And that's the kind of stuff that fixes this stuff. You have people who are out there supporting Planned Parenthood, for example, if we want to talk about the abortion issue. And they did a massive concert here Thursday night, all in support of Planned Parenthood, a much more notable lineup than what we saw this today and yesterday for Trump. That change, because then that money is going to get funneled into Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood can utilize that to lobby against the incoming administration, trying to defund them. And I think that's where it has to happen, not necessarily at a who can vote and who can't, but who can actually, propel their state legislature or their local legislature to actually create that kind of change.
Right. Do you think this was posed by Katie Talmo, that the administration would be able to repeal gay marriage and completely defund Planned Parenthood, as many are fearing? And this is one of the fears I think today that's happening right now. And that's basically two different questions, but
sure. And it's a valid fear.
Yeah, it is a valid fear. First part of that is, do you feel that the administration will be able to repeal gay marriage at this point at a federal level?
No. I don't think there's any chance of that, frankly, because first of all, Trump has stepped down on that heavily. Trump has said numerous times that he has no interest in going after that Supreme Court ruling, that it's the law of the land, I believe is what he said, a quote. And that is something that is so ingrained in our social culture now, right? It is such a cultural mainstay of who we are as a nation, especially over the last year and a half. I think it would be devastating, even to a more conservative candidate.
America great again, so it feels like we're almost stepping backwards a little bit. So I think that's where
true.
The fear lies with the rest of the country, where his rhetoric has been "Make America Great Again, again," and that's 1980 possibly, like you touched upon. And so if that's the case, I mean, we didn't have gay marriage back then. We didn't have equality for bathroom rights for trans people of all types and all different colors and shapes and sizes and all these different things. And I think it's legitimate that people are fearing this at this point.
Oh, absolutely. I do not I don't want to discount that fear, because it's a very valid fear, especially if you're a member of that community or you have family or loved ones in that community. I don't think Trump is going to touch it. His rhetoric has proven to move and stray far away from that. And quite frankly, I don't think he has anything to gain by that. I mean, keep in mind that this is a man who brought out a gay Republican on the RNC stage right before him, and then came out and started ad-libbing about how excited he was that a man came out and said, "I'm conservative and I'm gay and I'm here to talk to the RNC," and you all cheered. This is something I don't think people have to worry about. Now, that said, there are other more socially progressive ideals that are in more jeopardy for people. You mentioned gay rights and also abortion.
No, about Planned Parenthood.
All right. So
that's
Planned Parenthood,
a huge big one going on right now as well.
Absolutely. Well, Planned Parenthood defunding is something that's going to happen very likely on a state level, and that's something people are going to have to hammer their state representatives on. I don't know if Trump would touch that on a national scale. And then I think also you have to look at things, for example, the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act is something that now almost 20 million Americans get health insurance through. And that is a more socially progressive idea that, if lost, could have a very immediate
which this cracks me up.
Impact.
I don't think we talk about this enough. This is what cracks me up about the Republicans being so darn excited about repealing this act. This started with Romney.
Yeah,
And
Romney,
these
Massachusetts.
are Republicans' original ideas. And yes, you know, the Obamacare that came into play, this has been my full feeling about it all along, is that, you know, I actually am on Obamacare along with my kid. And the thing is it sucks. It's not nice. It's very expensive. And I get that. But I have also been, you know, one of those people that kind of champion behind it, because I'm like, you know, nothing is perfect in government when it first comes out. When Social Security first came out, when Medicaid first came out, when Medicare first came out, you know, it all just kind of sucked. And what we've had to do is have to have reform. When Obama put this out originally, I think what happened was the Republicans were pissed because it came under a Democratic, platform. And because of that, all the things that suck, if you start looking into it, are all these little attachments from, you know, bills that the Republicans put on that made Obamacare tougher. So it could be very easy for them to go back and go, we can remove this now, we can remove that now, and turn Obamacare into something more like Trump care. I think it's a dumb move, period, to try to repeal something like this. I think, if anything, I agree with this administration to not repeal it, but to more so just go through and try to, you know, fix it, because that's where we're at now. So
Obama is the first critic of his own initiative.
Right.
Obama has been very critical of the Affordable Care Act. He has repeatedly said that it is a work in progress, that it is something that he toiled to get passed. It is not perfect. It's not exactly what he wanted it to be, and he knows there's a lot of flaws in the system, and there are. You very astutely do mention, Carrie, that this is something that, instead of being repealed, likely just needs to be amended and further reformed and improved. And that's something we're probably going to see with Trump, because almost immediately after getting elected, he no longer said he was going to repeal it. He said he was going to let youth stay on their parents' plans for longer. A lot of the stuff that Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act championed, he was going to maintain. And now Senate Republicans are now saying that they don't necessarily want to repeal and replace. They just want to hold off until at least the next administration and dump it on them. So I don't think Obamacare is going anywhere soon. I don't think you're going to see Obamacare disappear in the next year with the swipe of, you know, Donald Trump's pen. But it is something to keep an eye out for, because yourself and many, you know, and it's very windy here, and over 19 million other Americans get their health insurance through that. Would you say that you are that being on the Affordable Care Act is more successful for you and your family than not having any health insurance?
Absolutely. I couldn't afford anything. Some of you know that I have a disabled child, and healthcare in this country is ridiculous. And she has a pre-existing condition, and for me not to be on something like that and take care of her, she would suffer. And I think that's what scares us the most, is like, you know, if they go ahead and repeal something like this, what does that mean for my child's health tomorrow? You know,
right.
And it's not just me. I mean, you know, I look at it, Reagan has more of a physical disability, where other people have, you know, these disabilities that, you know, whether it's a disability or if they have cancer or lung disease, and they're counting on this, people could die. And that's the main thing, you know. I mean, they could lose their health insurance, and it's such a cold practice in this country, you know. Oh, sorry, you don't have any insurance, we're going to have to kick you out of the hospital. You know, sorry, you need a lung machine, but you're going to have to die. You know, it's really kind of scary. So, I mean, for me, I feel that the act was a baby step in the right direction. And I'll tell you this, you know, we needed a president that had the balls and had the know-it-all and the experience and the legality behind him, so he could get something this harsh into effect. And he did that with a Republican Congress, and kudos off to him. I mean, it was something of a feat. It wasn't going to be perfect. It just wasn't. And I knew that going into it. I knew that buying into it. But you know what? I'm still here. There's a reason 20 million Americans are still here. There's a reason for it.
Exactly. And you mentioned especially, you know, for example, someone like your daughter who has a pre-existing condition, without the Affordable Care Act, that could certainly become problematic within private insurance circles to get coverage.
Sure.
And that's something that the Affordable Care Act does a remarkable job of handling. And that's something that that President Trump has mentioned as of several weeks ago, that he wanted to maintain pre-existing conditions. That was part of what he was going to be maintaining.
Right.
So
it does seem to be a little bit of flip-flopping around with Trump these days. You know, watching the speech itself, you know, I felt a little bad for the Republicans, actually. And I kind of was like, you know, the Republicans have their own platform, and Trump definitely does not share the same ideals that the Republican platform shares.
No.
So it was kind of I don't know, I want to say, you know, a big middle finger to the Republicans. Like, I'm going to do what I want. I've told you this all along. That is one thing I'll give this guy that he's been saying all along, that he has not gone back about, that I'm going to do what I want. And I think Republicans have tried really, really hard to control him, and they realize that they just can't. And he's under their umbrella, but in no way I believe that they are with him. And I think that's going to cause a lot of problems moving forward when he's, you know, how many bills that he'll write up, how many will actually get passed, and those types of things.
Right.
I think for the safety of the country, he actually kind of shot himself in the foot a little bit in this inaugural speech, in a good way, for the other people that are having fears, because, you know, if you turn both sides against you, you know, it's just you. So he's going to have an uphill climb, I think, at this point, which is actually a relief to see.
Yes, and as you said, you know, there's umbrellas on top of umbrellas, actually, because while he's under their umbrella, they're under his.
Right.
That is the beauty of our founding fathers, with the checks and balances of our three systems of government and our three branches. And Trump is going to learn very quickly that he is still going to have to contend with his own party.
Right.
Now, the question with that is, how much are they going to contend with him? Because is it political suicide to fight against the president on items of legislation? At what point does a Republican congressman, for example, put his foot down about an issue that he, you know, vehemently disagrees with Trump over, and is that going to cost him his next election?
Well, and it's interesting because you have politicians fighting a businessman. So for the first time, where usually, and I mean, I hate saying this, but politicians usually know their place and they know how far to push it. And now they're like, well, this guy doesn't know his place. He's kind of all over the place. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what people are going to do. If this is going to, you know, shake up Congress a little bit, if it's going to shake up the Senate, it's going to shake up both parties for them to just, you know, say, well, we got to fight fire with fire. But you're right. We have Phil Rude joining us in the chat room, and he just said he's not a businessman. He's a salesman. And you know what? I've touched base on that. But you are correct. And I kind of felt that was true, ringing true in this speech today, that if you want to call it a speech, I guess, more of a pandering, I'm sorry, to the public, just, you know, as usual. Yeah, it was, that's how he always is just selling to America to get those applause, you know, so.
He is, yeah. And I mean, also, to be fair to Trump supporters, there are certain things with Trump that, you know, the idea of him being an outsider, being a businessman, not knowing the game that he's playing is very appealing to them. Right. And I understand. There's a child just running down the Lincoln Memorial.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, he's freedom. Yeah. Live it up while you still can. Okay.
Yeah, you got about 10 hours left, kid. Go for it.
In any case, you know, that's very appealing to certain people because, for example, why are you yelling? Okay, this is what happens with live reporting. In any case,
it's not as loud on this side, just so you know. It's kind of quiet, so you can keep going.
That's good. There are certain things with him that are very appealing in that regard, and I think with that, they want a businessman. They want someone who doesn't listen to Congress. They want someone who doesn't, you know, put up with people on, the opposite party or put up with people in the same party giving him legislative grief over things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that's very appealing to Trump supporters. I understand why it's very appealing to them. And we're going to learn very quickly whether or not Trump can actually accomplish the things he wants to. The first 100 days are often, they're often put up on a bulletin board as the most important part of a presidency, right?
Mm-hmm.
They always say what they're going to do in their first 100 days. And usually none of it ever gets done.
Right.
But with Trump, it's very important to see what he does in the next 100 days, because we are going to see whether or not he can tame the beast of Congress, whether or not he can bring people into his fold that are going to help him run the country, because he is the first one to admit that he is not versed in all the elements of government that a normal president-elect typically is.
Well, and this is pretty interesting, too, because usually within an inaugural speech or an acceptance speech of any sort, we usually have a president kind of telling us and laying out what's going to happen. And, with this whole thing, he's more like, big things are going to happen. You got to trust me on that. It'll come out when it needs to. It's almost like a matter of secrecy. We have a new person in the chat room. His name is Nude Kareem. Hi, Nude, welcome. He's just asking really quick if there's any protests going on yet.
Yes. Okay. So this morning, as I talked about in the last broadcast, I was at the 420 protest. That's still going on throughout the city in various capacities. The anarchist protest was earlier this morning. I have not heard anything catastrophic from that. I had some colleagues who are heading down there, so I'll be able to report on that later this evening on our panel.
The anarchists did a nap, apparently.
Yes, and the anarchists in particular, as I talked about, they were not necessarily protesting as much as they were disrupting. And there was an anti-protest to their protest. It was actually the bikers came in, which is what worried me, because bikers, you don't want to mess with bikers,
right?
you don't want to piss off an anti-protest of bikers.
No.
So that seems to have gone out without a hitch. I believe very likely Washington PD and the National Guard probably stepped in to very delicately to create a barrier between them. And again, I'll know more about that tonight. But in terms of what's happening right now, we have several protests that are happening in the city right now. We have the upcoming Women's March, which is going to be tomorrow. And currently there are several protests that are up at McPherson Square, which is east of the White House. And then we also have protests happening throughout the parade route to varying degrees. The parade route is shut down to backpacks, bags of really any kind, unless it's a purse. They're shut down to mostly signs. They don't want Trump being heckled by protesters on the side of the street.
Right.
So we're not going to see a lot of that on the parade route. We are going to see a lot of it this evening. Yesterday, well, I guess today, about 3 a.m. today, there was the Deplorable. The Deplorable was one of the balls of essentially an alt-right group. Get it? Deplorable. And what they were doing, protesters came out, were throwing stuff at the people entering the Deplorable, and then the PD stepped in and started pepper spraying people. So that's been the most violent we've seen it. I guess that toned down pretty quickly. Now, the big thing to keep an eye out is the Women's March tomorrow, because a lot of the protests are starting to wind down. One other protest I should mention.
Not just taking place in Washington, but that is actually taking place all over the country. It's a big, big deal.
Exactly. The Women's March is taking place in most major cities. It's taking place in smaller cities. It's taking place online for the disabled. There's actually a March for the Disabled in which people who are disabled and cannot actually go out and march can add their social media presence essentially in support of the march. The march is something that is almost less of a protest, and it is a protest, but it's also more of a unity of women and social ideals, because it seems like everyone who's going to that protest is going for a different reason, which is great. I laud them for that, because I think that's what makes them a very successful protest sometimes. We are going to see some protests probably on the inaugural balls this evening. That's something we'll know more for on our next two broadcasts.
Sure.
I don't know what those are going to be like. And then two other protests I should mention that I've interacted with today. On my way in and getting into the Lincoln Memorial, well, Lincoln Memorial's right there, but getting into the Lincoln Memorial and coming down to the Washington Memorial, there were a lot of the I'm trying to determine how to call the radical religious protesters, These are the people who are holding the signs that say every Muslim is jihadist.
Yeah.
These people were on the the megaphones, saying. One of them was ranting about even if you're a Catholic, you're still going to burn in hell.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very specific things.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of that. I've seen that probably 5-6 times now with massive groups. And
Phil poses a
they
really
have
good question in the chat room. I want to interrupt you here real quick. He said the
Sure.
protests have been really highlighted around this event. We've been hearing a lot about them, whether it be through Facebook or Twitter. Do you think that there is a positive aspect to the Trump presidency in that it causes and special interest groups are making organized stands? So, like, I think we were kind of touching base a little bit on the last podcast about this, but we were kind of talking about, people are starting to stand up a little bit. And since there's these things that we just never really knew or we really discussed before, now it's not starting to come to a head, almost like a big zit on a teenager's face. It's like, oh God, we got to discuss. So he's just wondering, what do you feel about that?
The beauty of a divisive president is that it is going to create a lot of discourse, for better and for worse.
Mm-hmm.
That is something we are seeing here with Trump. It's something we're going to see for the next 4 years. And I think that's a great thing. I think it is the American public's job to do two things: to respect the office of the president. As I said on our last show, maybe not, you don't have to necessarily respect the specific president, but respecting the office and the government in which it embodies. Right. And then two, utilizing your voice in a beneficial way. And we're seeing that a lot. There are people who are protesting a number of things. I'm low on battery, but okay, we're good. We're back. My video's back, everybody. I actually, editorial tidbit, I'm traveling with 5 batteries. I am a mobile reporter to the nth degree today. Yeah, you should see the kind of crap I'm carrying with me. But in any case, with Trump, we are going to see a lot of protests, a lot of social protest in music. That's something we've already seen in some capacity. Yesterday, Mavis Staples and Arcade Fire released a new single. I believe it's called I Give You Power, designed to empower people who feel disenfranchised right now. Mavis Staples, yeah. But yes, I think Phil is right that this is going to happen. It is going to happen quite a bit. I think it's a good thing. The one thing I am worried about is that Trump and the press in particular, it's the press's job to be the check on the president, right? That is the job of the press. That's why I'm here. That's why everyone else is here. It is always our job as the American people to be critical and to be analytical. And because as Trump said today, and he's right, we are the people, that we determine these people. He is now taking, we are his bosses and he's taking his temp job. And I think that's very important to remember. And with that comes a lot of responsibility for people to, make their voices heard and care about what they're protesting and all that good stuff. But with the press, Trump tends to flip the dichotomy. Instead of the press being the check on the president, he is the check on the press. The president is the check on the press. At his press conference last week, when he shut the CNN reporter up and wouldn't let them ask their question, pointing at them saying, "You are fake news, you are fake news," that is scary. And I don't just mean that as a millennial journalist standing out here right now. Objectively, that is concerning, because the press is the check on the presidency, is the check on the bureaucracy, and that has to exist. And now we are learning as of yesterday that not only is Trump going to be curating the press corps, he's also going to be only allowing certain access to certain organizations, and then he's going to be moving a bunch of them off site. And that is very, very concerning. Well, because I feel the press corp is designed.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying the press corp is designed to be diverse. It is designed to be all-encompassing from a variety of networks, regardless of whether or not the sitting president agrees with those networks. You've never seen President Obama kick Fox News out of a press briefing. No. And that's something is very concerning.
Well, I think part of the problem is that when you handpick your press corps, you kind of just propagandate the entire country. So it's, at that point, you're not reporting the truth. You're just having, people just report what you want to hear. And it becomes like a Kim Jong-il type of a situation where there's people that just say, oh, everybody loves our elected official that we elected at gunpoint or whatever it was, Sure. you know, the truth be told, that people are in fear in these types of things. And so the press has always been a checks and balances, as you know, as you were talking about. And without that, I fear that we're just only going to hear what Trump wants us to hear, and, you know, for the next 4 years. And that is scary. So how do you combat that as a journalist yourself, Brett? And how do you get over that, and being told that, you know, you are fake news,
Fake news.
you are, you know, and we're talking
Yeah.
established, you know, news organizations for years,
Right.
you know, that
CNN.
have, yeah, CNN, and places that have had, you know, Chris Wallace, those types of places too, where they've had all these credentials and all these things backing them. How do you compete with that?
Well, I think the first thing to do is understand the difference between fake news and news reported to the best ability of the network that later turns out not to be fully accurate. That's a very, very fine line. There's a difference between propagating fake news and actually reporting to the best of your ability, to the best of your journalistic integrity, and then later finding out that some of what you're reporting might not be fully fleshed out, that some of it might have been, you know, brought from an incorrect source, and you later have to create corrections, you later have to expand upon stories. That's going to happen. Journalism is a very human profession.
Can it become a legal issue where the, you know, the press can go back and then sue the presidency for libel and defamation of character?
I would be more worried about the president suing the press, actually, as something, you know, when he would stand on his stump speeches very early in his campaign around this time last year and would point at the back and say, I want to be able to sue you guys for libel. And that's very dangerous. And obviously, you know, I'm a journalist, right? So of course I am concerned about this.
All of us in
podcasting
are similar to that too. We're reporting what we, you know?
Sure, yeah. And to answer your question as to how to combat that, I think the way to combat that is to not necessarily use the presidency as an avenue to obtain information, but use people around the presidency to create avenues for information and to create discourse. Because just because Trump is going to curate his press corps doesn't necessarily mean that representatives are not going to talk to people, that his staff are not going to talk to people, that we are going to see continued leaks. I think that a more closed-off administration, a more curated administration, is just going to get hammered on leaks. That's inevitable, whether it be from the inside of the FBI, whether it be from WikiLeaks, whether it be from someone like Chelsea Manning, who of course was granted clemency several days ago. Yeah. So yeah, we're going to see people get the information one way or the other. It's whether or not the president is going to be tactful with the media and actually getting them what they need. Now here's the thing.
Sure.
I sympathize with any president dealing with the media. It's a hard job. I acknowledge that if I was the president, I'd be annoyed at me too. And I think I know I'm doing my job well if that's the case. Now, with him, the thing is, there's a difference between handling the media, which, for example, Ronald Reagan was very good at handling the media. Ronald Reagan would use his age, right? If he was walking off Air Force One and someone asked him a question they didn't like, he'd just go, "What? Couldn't hear you." That was one of his signature things. Yeah. And he'd just walk right away from the question. But Reagan also was slightly more open with the press. You know, the amount of disdain that Trump has for the press, the amount of times he has openly bashed the press, is unprecedented in terms of a president taking office. So that is of concern.
Oh, we lost audio on Brett for just a second there. Give him a second to catch back up. I'll just go ahead and give a little shout out to Phil and Anud in the chat room while he catches up. You're right, Phil. Journalists aren't the only ones with the skin in this game. A lot of us citizens who do give a crap about being informed are going to get screwed out as well. And I agree with you. I think this is going to be it's going to be a fun 4 years. You know, we're a little apprehensive of all these things that are happening. We did lose connection with Brett. His camcorder went out there, but if he comes back, that would be great. If not, we can reconvene our session in about 2 hours. So make sure you're checking with us and the Statecraft through all of our good things. We have tons of questions. So if you are listening right now and you have something to say, please give me a tweet over at Carrie Sims 1 at Twitter, or you can reach us at blazingcariboustudios.com. You can also reach us on Facebook at Blazing Caribou Studios, and you can reach all of our shows from there. Having said that, I'm going to go ahead and log out right now, and we will be back in about 2 hours for more coverage. And then even this evening, we're going to have a live panel discussion. So it's a lot of fun today. So I will be seeing you and talk to you soon. Thank you guys for listening, and thank you for joining us live in the chat room.